Right, here we go then. So this is our fifth episode of 2 Pints of Lager and a Spreadsheet for this series. We're talking about funding the future and navigating investment opportunities. We've got 3 wonderful guests today. I'm really excited about this conversation. I feel it's going to be lively, maybe even controversial, Lizzie. Who knows?
Okay. I don't know why you're looking at me.
Who knows? Alasdair, we'll kick off with you. You were one of the founding directors of North Star Ventures 20 years ago. Funding landscape of the Northeast must have changed dramatically in that time, or maybe it hasn't. How's it looking out there?
It really has changed beyond all recognition, to be honest. We were founded actually back in 2004, so just over 20 years ago, by the local government, One Northeast at the time,
right,
back in the RDA days. They recognised that at the time there was no venture capital in region at all. 3i had left the region a few years beforehand, and very little was going on in terms of the whole sort of tech ecosystem, angel investing, venture investing. There was very little happening. I don't think universities, as you were very active in terms of the whole spin-out process, etc. So I think, One Northeast very cleverly set up the first fund for the region. They set aside £30 million or so. And fundamentally, North Star was set up to manage that first fund. Originally, we were a company limited by guarantee, so we were sort of under quite a lot of state influence, and our remit was probably primarily sort of economic development led, to try and kick off and found some new economy type industries to replace all the industries that had disappeared during the sort of period of deindustrialization, etc. So, replace the loss of jobs in mines, shipbuilding, etc. We started off with that first fund, investing across the sort of tech ecosystem in the Northeast, and we've gone on. So 20 years later, and since then, other fund managers have come into region. There's now 4 or 5 in region. A much more active angel activity, and at the start of some angel networks, but certainly lots of freelance angels working on their own. And in fact, we work alongside a lot of angels and indeed corporates, institutional investors in what we do. So the landscape's changed really dramatically, and one forgets that in this region it's sort of 20-ish years old. We compare that to how long it's been established down in the southeast in the Golden Triangle, and we're often sort of compared slightly unfavourably, I think, to the southeast. But we forget it's still really quite nascent here. We're still relatively early in the game, and perhaps things have developed really well. Perhaps the missing piece of the jigsaw is the sort of exit piece, the end of the journey, where funders sort of start getting their money back and making profits and creating more mentors and angel investors. Now that is now starting to happen. But so we're nearly at the full cycle, to be honest, but things have progressed well.
Brilliant. And Lizzie, your career, I guess you started within a startup, didn't you? And today you're working within the universities and helping spin out of the university. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in the world of the university and how a spin out emerges. So,
my background is I started with I was part of a founding team back in 2008, which successfully exited in 2014. And I've since was then part of another couple of tech startups. So I've been part of the landscape for quite a long time in the Northeast, and really been very lucky to have been a beneficiary of the funding landscape as Alasdair's described it, because it's grown. My role now in Newcastle University is to take research out of labs and into new startup businesses, but actually a spin out isn't actually a startup, and I think that's the thing that often gets a bit confused. A university spin out is scale up technology, so it's usually been heavily invested, often had a huge amount of research income put into that, and grant funding. It's called translational research, so translate it from something in a lab into something that's going to go out there in the world and have a real impact. But the team around that is usually a startup team. So we have the challenging universities, so we've got to take these scaling, ready-to-go technologies that have already usually been proven, and we've got to bring in a team that's going to sit around that and that's going to make what usually is a game-changing, often life-saving technology, or having a positive impact on the environment, or spin-outs tend to be in engineering, life sciences, so they're doing good things in the world. And so we take our role at the university really seriously in terms of that we want those opportunities to go out in the world and flourish and really reach their potential. But we can only do that with three things, and that's the scale-up research, and that is the commitment from the academic founders to want to develop that opportunity into something bigger than what they might be able to achieve in a lab. And the third thing is the management. So we bring in experienced management to be able to realise the business potential to match that with that of the research potential that's usually already been sort of well established.
Yeah, I think often when we get talking to a spin out, we're talking about setting up a bank, well, incorporation almost.
Yeah.
Setting a bank account up, and then you've got all of this work that's gone on before, and then suddenly you're into the nitty gritty of getting that business really out of the blocks, aren't you?
Yeah, and that acceleration doesn't often fit with the standard accelerator model. So spin outs don't often, we haven't quite found like a match for the accelerator ecosystem within the Northeast yet, where spin outs can really sort of benefit because they're quite niche. But Newcastle has grown a portfolio. We now have 43 businesses, will be 45 soon, and the portfolio is probably valued. I mean, obviously within there's the unicorns that are going off to do great things, and then there's the ones that are having the sort of standard startup issues, as you would expect. That's probably valued around 350 million.
Wow.
And it's probably something we don't celebrate enough, but it really does make a difference. We're talking to just your layperson. We're talking about organ transportation that keeps organs alive for 72 hours. We're talking about electric motors that don't need without the need for rare earth magnets. We're talking about interventions for phobias that change people's lives. This is really good stuff, and it makes a difference to the person on the street.
Cool. And Julie, your career has started in banking, corporate finance, and now you're with Umi, still linking investments and angels and trying to generate an ecosystem around that. What does a good investment look like for you at the moment?
Well, from our perspective, our role at Umi is very much to help business founders find the information or the finance that they need.
Yeah.
We run a number of programs that are local authority supported, and we also do things from a commercial perspective ourselves, because we're really committed to trying to kind of make it easier for businesses to know who to speak to. But in terms of the investment side of things that we're seeing a lot of at the moment, we've had quite a lot of success in the early stage businesses, much like what you've described there, helping kind of couple angel investment with some of the Innovate UK grant competitions. But it is normally in that space where they are generating something that is really, really impactful in the world. It has got a clear path towards kind of commercialization and eventually a point of where the investor can make some money. And they're the two main ones that we're seeing traction with at the moment. There's nothing real in terms of sector specific. We're seeing all sorts. But the main work that we're having to do and kind of plug in and enable these investments is around helping the founders get ready to present their story in a way that's understandable and helps them move through that investor conversation as easily as possible.
I guess you've all touched on it a little bit, and Alasdair, you mentioned about the journey changing and how the landscape's changed. What do you think the landscape looks like at the minute in the Northeast? And I guess comparing to the Southeast, it is very different up here. But if you've got a company that is going for investment, how do you think that sits in the Northeast at the minute?
Well, I think it's much better than it was. So, the region started off very much on sort of government intervention funds. Just if I look at our own story, 2015, we bought ourselves out. We're now a sort of team-owned business. And since then, we've had a much greater emphasis on sort of commercial returns rather than necessarily just economic intervention type funds, which I think has been the story across the ecosystem. And we've since diversified, not away from government funds. We still run government funds, but into private high net worth funds, charitable funds. There's a lot more players kind of looking to get involved from a sort of fund of funds perspective in terms of, I guess in some ways leveraging the opportunity of the Northeast, but also helping to use venture to sort of drive impact, return, prosperity, etc. It's a sort of key tool for sort of placemaking in the region. So I think there's much more choice. We've had a bit of a dip recently with a sort of lack of probably government funds over the past sort of couple of years. A situation we're hoping is going to change. I think in the last few years, probably the biggest change is the number of sort of private individuals that have stepped up to get into the investment space in the region. Just ourselves, we've launched the Venture Sunderland Fund. When was that? September last year, and that's all private high net worth funded from people in Sunderland who are looking to try and drive the creation of new Sunderland headquartered businesses that have good sort of global scaling potential. We've also launched our EIS growth funds. We've probably raised funds now from sort of 17, 18 investors in those funds. So there's a lot more people sort of getting involved in the market, which I think is great for entrepreneurs, to be honest. We desperately need it. I mean, to be honest, we need a lot more, but we are on a journey. It's getting a lot better. But I still think the region offers the potential to sort of double or triple the amount of available finance. I think we can use it. I think it would drive more spin outs. It would drive sort of more entrepreneurial startups. I think the potential is here. I think we just need more cash to help sort of push some of these opportunities through.
I guess we've always struggled with the angel network in the Northeast, haven't we? It's always been something we'd probably do with more of.
I mean, the problem with the angel networks are fed by sort of successful entrepreneurial exits, and I guess they've only really started. I mean, in probably the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah. But there have been a number of successes in recent years, and they've made people money, and more importantly, they've allowed people to sort of put back into the ecosystem in terms of mentoring time, advisory time, and so on, and investment, and that's what we need more and more of. And it's also creating sort of tech-savvy, experienced, angel investors who have done a journey and can use that experience and expertise to sort of help this kind of next generation of founders and entrepreneurs. And as I say, because we're still relatively new on this journey in the Northeast compared to other parts of the country and the US, it's only the last 4 or 5 years that's really starting to happen. But I hope, looking ahead over the next few years, we will see as more exits happen, as more people make money, as more people put back, there will be, certainly more angel money coming into the region. And I hope, there's a lot of talk at the moment about pension funds and the Mansion House reforms and so on, and the government pushing more pension funds to get involved in the region. So, I mean, our local pension funds in the Northeast don't invest currently any money in the local community in the Northeast, which is just staggering. I mean, to think that, I find it amazing that nothing of my pension money is being put to use in placemaking in the Northeast, which I it's terrible. Most people realise. I'm sure most people want a proportion of their wealth to go and help to sort of push the region forward. But that's something that I really hope to see changing in the next few years, and will make a really fundamental difference to the level of investments available in the Northeast.
And Lizzie, how do you get that early stage university spin out? I don't know, collaborating with the VCs. How does it work?
Well, I think the benefit of university research is that it has something. If you and I decided tomorrow we want to set up a donut factory and we wanted to go and get some money,
let's do it.
Yeah. You haven't tasted my food. We would we might go to friends and family, we might but really you sort of, there isn't necessarily a set structure that you might want to go. Whereas in what the universities are able to create is a structure and introductions, but also a series of gateways that someone can go to be seen as investor ready.
Yeah.
And we have a few things. And as I mentioned before, we bring in management. So that really helps that we have then a business plan that is written and created, and business models that are devised with a collaboration between bringing business people in as well as the academic founding team. So that's one thing that investors will give it a huge amount of reassurance to. The earlier we can do that, and the earlier we can start giving visibility to people like North Star, the better, so that we're getting that feedback from industry early that where we're going is the right direction. I think that gives VCs and angels much more comfort. There are programs in the university ecosystem that exists where they can go and do, academics can go and do market research and go and test out their ideas in the market, which I think is highly valuable and allows that pivot to happen early on. However, I think it's all around collaboration as early as possible. And we're very lucky to have really good connections with our VC community. We also, the North East universities also have their own spin-out fund, which is managed by North Star now, which is dedicated to funding early stage research. So there's lots of mechanisms in place, but ultimately somebody's only going to invest if that idea is somebody can actually see clearly what the opportunity is, and they're not bamboozled by this is a really great bit of science that's going to keep just getting developed and overdeveloped. I do have a statistic which was I didn't realise this is still the case, and you might be able to fact check me. So it's only around 10% of UK venture capital funds are invested outside of London and the South East. That's it's wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we're still...
For me, I think the region, perhaps traditionally has been seen as a bit of a sort of begging bowl, looking for grant funding, looking for freebies. I think it's moving now to, that is incredible. And it just, for me, there's such an untapped opportunity in the Northeast. If I look at your, Newcastle University and the other 4 universities in the Northeast, between them they've got about 200 million of research income per year going into developing technologies, moving technologies forward, and really what we're spitting out at the end, and how much we're turning into businesses that have great decent jobs, have a good sort of impact on the local community, is still relatively small, I think, compared to the potential. You look at somewhere like Oxford, that has 800 million of dedicated venture capital to kind of pull out its research and commercialize it. Just if we look at our research income, we have a potential for at least a couple of $100 million a year that we could be using towards our 5 Northeast universities to really accelerate the commercialization potential. And just think of the new businesses that would be created, the high quality jobs that we provide, and these would be businesses that headquartered in the Northeast, maybe going to the size of Sage, trading globally all based on some really interesting novel technologies. And, I think universities represent a massive untapped opportunity to really drive, the government's agenda right now is growth. It surprises me that they don't put more emphasis on the sort of the screaming opportunity that is the Northeast, I think.
Yeah. And we'll only get there with more proof of concept funding ultimately, and that's what we've been banging on the door of government to say. Give us more money to do some more stuff. We can prove it. We can build it. We can get investment in. We'll then create jobs.
And I think there's a role as well in terms of educating the actual potential angel investors in the region, and we've spent quite a lot of time via some of our activities in terms of doing that angel investor kind of education process, because I think sometimes it's just a confidence thing. There'll be a lot of people who've maybe had success and would like to take advantage of some of the benefits of being an angel investor or share some of their expertise, but it's kind of like, how do you know how to do it? So we have been delivering quite a lot of education sessions in collaboration with the UKBEA to try and encourage more Northeast-based entrepreneurs who have maybe founded, exited, and would like to maybe share some of their wealth in different ways, but also their expertise. So I think that sitting alongside some of the institutional funds would be a really positive, step forward for a lot of the businesses in the region.
I think you probably see a lot of businesses, and I guess at different stages in the life cycle. How do you help businesses turn that idea into what is an investable business?
So I think that's a really. I was thinking about what the the responsibility from the university spin-outs, but there are also a lot of businesses that aren't in that spin-out space, but potentially are considering whether they should take investment or whether they can fund it in a different way. So a lot of our work is around diagnosing what the business's opportunity is, and what their potential path and also their personal ambition for the business is. So there's a lot of work goes on from a consultancy basis and helping entrepreneurs map out where they want to go and then align them to universities if that's where they need to go, or different advisors to help them on their journey. But I think there is a big focus around helping a founder understand, truthfully, is investment the right space for them, or is it not? Is it never going to realise that output, and should we go down a different route? Or if they're kind of hamstrung around the idea of not taking investment, exploring why, and trying to educate around the fact that maybe if you have a different view, you could potentially scale to a different level. So I do think there's a big kind of psychological session with the founder to understand where they maybe want to go. And from an UMI perspective, that's kind of what our advisors do on a daily basis, to try and unlock whatever the next step forward is. But I always say every business is different. And the landscape now is more fragmented than it's ever been. So to try and make that decision on your own, I think is practically impossible. So I always encourage building a strong network of trusted individuals around you to help you kind of figure out which route you should take.
It's quite a key point as well, that like getting into a founder's head and understanding what they want in the long term. Because like you say, going down the investment route is quite a specific route to go down. And if that's not what you want and then you do it, I've seen quite a few founders where you've seen over the years that have taken it and then it's completely the wrong route and they shouldn't have done it. So you've kind of got to be bought into it, I guess, for at least a period of time. I guess you've seen that as well, where you've had businesses come in and it's potentially not the right route for them.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, I think the personal ambitions of a founder is a massive thing, but equally the type of business they're running and the sort of potential. And there's plenty of businesses that are great businesses that perhaps should best run as kind of lifestyle businesses, gentle organic growth, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And that's the majority of small businesses, to be honest with you.
So some of them will be great businesses for a long time, though, and that's the...
Well, absolutely, yeah. But I think that, investment is a real, or certainly equity investment is only for a very, very small number of quite niche businesses that have sort of huge scaling potential. Yeah. It only really works in that sort of scenario. So it is quite, it's a very small proportion of the whole funding landscape. So I'm sure, as Julie will, I'm sure, be advising people, that the vast majority beyond that will be looking to potentially take on loans or some kind of mezzanine type finance, which is much more suitable, to be honest with you.
I think sometimes it's kind of dispelling the myth of it being a buzzword that everybody can take investment. Sometimes that is, people will sit down and say, I want to take investment. And then when you go through the process of understanding where the ambitions are, it's potentially what they think they should do, but not necessarily the right route for that business. Same on the flip side. I would never want to take investment because I've heard so many negative stories. Well, let's just unpick that, because there actually are quite a lot of positive. You just probably don't hear about them as often. And it's kind of coaching through that process, because we certainly don't have enough kind of positive case studies and examples of where it's gone really well kind of floating around the Northeast, probably because of the point you made earlier, Alasdair, around the fact that, we're 4 or 5 years into this. So our kind of track record is building. In 5 more years' time, we'll have lots of success stories that will hopefully influence people's mindset and attitude towards it. So I do think from a stakeholder perspective who sits alongside businesses, we've all got a responsibility of kind of dispelling myths via factual examples that have gone well, not blindly ignoring the negatives or the risks, but kind of trying to create a bit of balance for people to make decisions.
And I think crucially for founders, they need to be prepared if they want to take on equity investment. Their ambition should be to sort of grow and ultimately sell the business, and they should recognise that that's what they're trying to achieve, and they're trying to hit a specific end milestone and perhaps an exit target. But if you're trying to build a business to kind of pass on to future generations, then equity probably isn't right for you. There are ways of doing it, but fundamentally you should be really prepared to go on a journey with an institution. If you want to go on a journey with an institutional investor, it's probably much easier to create the value required by all the sort of stakeholders if the business is ultimately sold. So most of our businesses are sold to trade. Some are taken on by private equity to be grown further, but the most common exit route, certainly for us, is trade sale.
One of our passions is SEIS and EIS, and probably some of the myths around that, and the word angel investor as well. And you mentioned earlier about education. Like, what is an angel investor? Do they need a private jet? Or have they got millions in the bank? Are they off to see Richard Branson once a year, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, we've got the Northern Investor Hub, which is a curation of high net worth individuals, VCs, and people who've got the appetite to invest their own capital. They self-certify, in terms of the criteria that needs to be hit to qualify as an angel. But from that perspective, it generally is folk who have got that ability to invest into something, and also add some support and mentorship. It's more than just money. From an angel investment perspective, you generally do see somebody coming along who can help you kind of understand and mentor and map your journey and probably share a bit of expertise.
Yeah.
The money's one area, but we always talk about the fact of finding somebody who's really positively going to impact you and your growth at this stage, rather than just somebody who's a hands-off investor and pops the money in. That's the general kind of positive things we see coming out of our investor network at the moment.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And then you've got the funds, haven't you, Alasdair, like your own, where you can, where you may be looking for more volume of investors.
We say to, certainly where we operate, which is sort of, in the early stages, often pre-seed, seed, just as business is starting up and commercializing, it is a really high risk part of the investment ecosystem. So when we talk to angels, I think it's always, it's really high risk. It's an angel. I think it's, you've got to be wary about just investing in one or two or three companies. If you're going to invest at the sort of stage where we're investing at, you ideally need to be into a diversified portfolio of 8 or 10 as a minimum, to be honest, which some people have cash to put, 100 or so into, 10 investments. That's one thing. But for most people who are starting off, at a lower level, a fund like the sort of EIS funds that we run is perhaps a better idea in terms of at least getting a small piece of 5 or 6 companies in any one tax year kind of thing. At least it's a good sort of entry point to at least start with a fairly diversified portfolio, get a flavour of what's going on, meet a few different management teams, understand some of the sort of highs and the lows of the investment game before potentially branching out and sort of diving deep into one direct investment where you might want to sort of, commit your time, more of your money, etc. But recognizing that when you're doing that, you are, the risk the risks are going, significantly up.
And Lizzie, I guess a university spin out can scale really quickly. Go through that seed round and suddenly you're in like a different landscape, aren't you? Series A and then maybe exit quite soon, or?
Well, yeah, and that's what happens every day,
Yeah.
No, that's just not that. And that in principle is the possibility. The challenges that make that possibility not always viable is, well, one, funding.
Yeah.
So even if once you get that pre-seed in, that's, if you're not making money, if you're not doing the business, if you're not selling stuff, then that money is going to be depleting fast. You're going to need to bring in the teams. So in order to deliver the work. So there's there's quite a famous diagram that shows the sort of double dip of scaling a company. And the challenge tends to be, well, there's two. The two dips tend to be, first of all, getting that first bit of money, like the first bit of investment, and then you see, you get your investment, your board ready, hire some staff, get some premises, and now that's probably what time when you start to see these companies come in. And then the next stage is where basically shit's got real.
Yeah.
And you've got responsibilities and you've got a team that has been put together and might start to be showing some of its potentially, immaturity, or it's lack of experience, or it's relationships are starting to become a bit tense as the pressure starts to build. You're more, if you take on money, you're then more accountable. You've got people asking you difficult questions that you might not know the answer to, and that's okay. But then if you're not getting your own support network of going to people going, I've been asked this question, I've no idea what this means, then all of a sudden you might be starting to get some founders getting defensive, and therefore there's those conversations in the boardroom are getting less useful because we're now logging heads and people are being held to account. And then we're into people crisis management, and nobody's spoken about the technology for months, maybe weeks. And that's the challenge that we see replicated, and I've seen replicated both in my own personal experience. We see, but not just that's just a startup life, right? And then you get to that next dip of like, we're running out of money.
Yeah.
Does anybody mention the money?
Yeah.
and then you've got that moment of going and speaking to people like Alasdair and people that work for him. And are you going to speaking to them because putting through gritted teeth going like, no, this is going really well? Or are you going and speaking to them and going, this is going great, we're looking to scale? And the spidey senses investors get, because they see these people every single day, you can start to look through, and you probably know a few key questions to then probably just tap gently on the tensions that then start to see things unravel. And you don't really need a data room to see that, because it tends to be the sort of classic, so-and-so's not going on with so-and-so, we need to start to restructure, we need to look at this. And that's that second dip, which is so much based on the logic kind of starts to fall away, and we start to get into the feelings realm of kind of like, oh, something's not quite feeling right, and how do we then put those things in place to then rectify that as quickly as possible? But if you've never done it before, you don't know the questions to ask. So my point is putting the experience around that table, but understanding and making that choice about who you're putting around your board table, who you're getting as advisors, who you're speaking to as a founder to inform your decisions becomes absolutely critical at that scale point. If you get that wrong, it's probably not going to work. But understanding what right and wrong is also, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And that's why this job is so fascinating, why I'm sure, because it tends to be, it's never the technology that's failing when you're working in a spin out, because as I said, that's been heavily invested in already. It's getting the right team around and getting the focus on going out there and selling a product or a service, and going out there and talking to customers and being less. It's that finding that balance between what's going on and learning about the business, but then going out there in the world and doing, because these guys are never going to look at something unless there is a trajectory of and also showing that not just on potential, but also on real numbers have actually done something.
So that dynamic changes really quickly, I guess, from
really quickly
looking for your seed round to suddenly, right, we've got to make this.
And the decision about what kind of investor you bring in, you bring in some angel investment, the relief, we've done it. But then what's that money attached to? Are they do they have their own vision, their own direction that they want this to go in? How they run businesses, is it very different ideologically to how you want to run a business? Are you just going to hand it all over to somebody else who's maybe got, you're just so pleased they've done something to make this happen, but then at what cost does that come?
I think I always try and kind of, so you really need to understand what somebody's ambition are for the investment. How quickly do they want to see a return? Are they patient, or is it a 3-year? And I've seen founders not ask that question till they're already in, and then they're under pressure to see sort of quicker traction than they're possibly able to ever achieve, but because they just wanted the money in at that point. So it is really important to kind of hold your nerve and say potentially no if you're not aligned from an ethical or value or a future trajectory perspective. But when you're really looking for money, that's quite difficult. So it is important that advisors say, have a moment, put your foot on the ball, let's weigh it up. This is like a marriage that is going to end at some point. not like a marriage, hopefully, but you know, where I'm getting from. Maybe by, statistically it could be. But, from that perspective, make sure it's a good ending and, get the kind of all of the skeletons out of the closet at the beginning so you can be as aligned as possible. Because things don't go to plan, do they? So...
Things never go to plan.
Exactly. And I think, the forecast we see, it's like, yeah, okay,
I always think,
let's make it look worse.
I always think the forecast is just one scenario of the future, and it's the one scenario will never transpire.
It's a guess.
But it won't ever do what it was.
It's your best guess.
Do you have like killer questions that you ask that that if you just like sort of just tap the dominoes can just unravel quickly when you see something?
Well, I go back to what you said, Liz, and I couldn't agree anymore. The team is so important, and when I look back at all the ones that we've been involved with that haven't worked out, it is always, pretty much always, a team dynamic issue. It's either the core founding team where the chemistry just wasn't quite right. I mean, it's a very intense environment to raise money and do the sort of 24/7 working required to build an early stage company and take it through to success. And I think, under that environment, tensions will arise, and it's so crucial that there's a good fit between that founding team. We spend a lot of our time, listening to people who, fallen out with X or Y, and you're trying to sort of pull back in, and or persuade someone that they need to go. And in the early stage market, if as soon as you get lawyers involved in HR issues and so on, you're screwed. The thing's not going to, they don't have the companies don't have the cash, and investors like us who are relatively small checks don't have the cash to sort of sort things out with sort of with lawyers and so on, really, to be honest. But if it gets to that stage, it's gone too fast. It's about trying to kind of hit these problems in the early on and try and sort things out and move people on if that's the best way, or supplement with other people. But it's that core team. It's then, as you said, that getting the right advisors and board members around you, but it's also the wider stakeholder relationship with your investors. I've seen quite often a business, once it's raised a few million quid, might have 4 or 5 different institutional investors on the caps table, and potentially a whole bunch of angels who came in at the sort of pre-seed level. That's a lot of different people, potentially with different expectations and with different ambitions, and just keeping all of those different expectations aligned with the founding team. That's where a chair is such a key person, an independent chair who can sort of take a good view and have the necessary chats with individual investors if things are starting to go awry and so on, and make sure it's keeping the train on the track, I suppose, as it goes forward. So killer questions. It's anything that starts to get behind the team to understand the true dynamic and who's really pulling their weight and who's really key to the business, and whether they've really got a good mix of technical, commercial, sales, etc. It's a really hard thing to do. And whenever we get involved in business, it's by definition a fairly early stage team. There are a lot of skill gaps, and that's all part of the role, is to try and help people to fill those gaps, and as they develop, bring in the money, but also bring in the talent. It's money and talent is crucial to ingredients to growth for all these small firms.
I think it comes back to that point before as well. Having a startup company that's raising investment and scaling is a quite a unique role compared to a standard job or a career, isn't it? I think I've seen a lot of people who've they've hired people out of a big corporate or something to come and be part of a founding team, and it just doesn't work, does it? So
it doesn't work. I mean, so many people out of a big organisation have been used to having big teams around and everything, a lot of things done for them, all the admin sorted, some the coffee made. In a startup, you just roll your sleeves up,
clean the toilet,
and get on with it. And as you know from your own business, and we're a small 10-person business as well. It's absolutely right. It's a shame because people from big business do have a lot of huge connections, huge experience, huge expertise of how to do things at scale. But often they can be a relatively small cog in a very big wheel. And many do add great value, but that's often where things do go wrong. Is bringing someone in who has the big company mindset that just is and the smaller startup just isn't ready for that sort of that approach at the stage they come in. So that is a potential. Often a potential issue now.
I think
it's difficult because you also need people with the networks and stuff, and often getting someone from a big corporate, they have a good broad network of potential strategic partners, potential customers for these small businesses. So they can play a really important role, but maybe bring them in an advisory capacity, or mentorship, or consultant, or whatever.
I think that's one of the things we see. You need that ambition, that entrepreneurialism, but it's the culture and the values that the founders have and then develop with the growing team around them that I think helps them bridge from seed and into a Series A and on again. And often we've seen with clients, when that Series A round closes, suddenly it's like, oh my God, what now what? And there's even more pressure. There's more stakeholders around the room. Are we doing any education around, that cultural piece and how important it is when we're going through the early stage? Because we mentioned it's not all about money, which it definitely isn't.
No, we certainly spend time around the importance of the management team and those key people, and encourage founders to have the humility to understand their gaps.
That's
and
the word,
not
yeah.
just try and paint a really glossy facade, because that's probably what opens up those killer questions. If everything's perfect, anybody assessing will start looking for the cracks. So I think there is a big part of that. And, we see hundreds of pitch decks every week, month and whatnot. And the first feedback is we really need to represent the team and the strength of the team, and then also the plan to bridge any gaps. As you go through that investment process and you grow and scale the due diligence process, and more, larger rounds now is so involved around that people and the psychometric side of leadership. So I think it's about educating and telling the founders and helping them understand how they bring that part as part of their business journey, if you like. But it is often around that psychological piece of whether a founder can kind of get the mindset across to an investor in a positive way. And that sometimes actually brings back the question of, is investment right for you? Because if you can't get that humility and that kind of position of somebody sitting alongside helping you move forward, and it's going to just be a bun fight constantly and disagree, and that potentially tells you that might not be a positive route forward. So I think it is important, and we certainly try and educate at every stage we can. That's the same on whether it's equity or just growing businesses for scale and exit to trade without any investment, because it is about that strength of your leadership team and ability to plan for gaps, isn't it?
I think it really helps if you can start off with a broad team who are all aligned on the vision, where the business is going, and where they're trying to shoot for in terms of the exit. What we see a lot is perhaps more of a sole founder who's come in and is the guy or girl kind of but behind the vision, who's kind of brought in a few employees who are working for the founder. But it's not, well, I mean, there are examples where sole founders have achieved huge success, but generally we shy a little bit away from those scenarios. We're always looking for a founding team where there's 2 or 3, 4 founders who all have good solid equity stakes in the business, and they've all really sort of bought into that journey, because they're all to get there you've got to give up a lot for a number of years to put in the level of effort required and so on to have any chance of success. And we do find there's more chance of success if you have got that founding team, and it then helps to sort of keep the alignment as investors come to the fore, as you go through your later round Series A and so on. If you've still got you've got 4 or 5 core people in the business who are all singing from the same hymn sheet or shooting in the same direction, it's just a lot easier than having it built around sort of one person's personal passion.
We've talked a lot, I guess, about investment and the various gaps and challenges. Have you got any bold predictions for investment in the North East over the coming year or further ahead?
Well, my great hope, I hope it's a prediction, but certainly my great hope is that the level of available investment to North East entrepreneurs will triple, quadruple over the next few years. And I hope that will happen as angel activity gets more more common as the universities commercialise even faster than they're doing, and there are great plans afoot in the Northeast for new funds, etc., that will help to drive that, which I think is fantastic. And so I think there's a real opportunity here for investors to come in much greater numbers than they are today, and I believe that will happen. I also think there's an opportunity for funding streams that are often a little bit disparate. North Star does early stage equity. There are lots of other people doing different things. When I look at how we could best sort of drive growth and prosperity in a region like the Northeast, placemaking in a region like this involves not only building, creating great quality jobs for people, but it's equally about the housing, it's about the infrastructure, it's about the communities. Sometimes we don't always do that in a particularly coordinated fashion. In our Venture Sunderland Fund, for example, where we're trying to back local entrepreneurs, but also attract in entrepreneurs from elsewhere. They often, if it's a biotech company, for example, they might look at Sunderland and think, well, where's the lab space? You might be able to give me some funding, but where's the lab space and so on? And it's sort of made us realise that if we had a package of funding that actually for a advanced manufacturing business gave them the best advanced manufacturing premises, combined with the working capital we can get from the fund, or great lab space for a medical company combined with the working capital required. I think there's room to coordinate more amongst the funding streams to help sort of just grease the wheels a bit more to kind of make this entrepreneurial journey that little bit easier. And plus, once you start combining funding streams, I think, in a sense, venture capital is pretty high risk. Property investment development is pretty low risk compared to, in a sense, if you start putting some of these funding streams together as a package, you sort of de-risk it a bit for on the venture capital side. You sort of potentially lift the yield a bit on the property investment side. I just think there's room for more coordinated funding streams. So my prediction is we'll see a bit more of that in the Northeast in the coming years.
I think we've been pretty disconnected, haven't we, across the Northeast, and the universities, as an example, haven't really joined up fully, have they? So
they have
now
very much so. I mean, we're now in the 6th year of Northern Accelerator.
Yeah.
So we can be, and they've got the universities. Northeast universities just got £8.1 million of seed funding. It's like we've been working together. We maybe don't shout about it enough, but we've been working together well, and we share learnings really well. There isn't, it's we've created a fantastic collaborative platform that's allowing us all.
Lizzie, do you see the one particular sector maybe that the Northeast is going to fly the flag for?
For me, sort of 250 million to spend, and I had to spend it in the Northeast. I would give it to just going on Alasdair's point, I would give it to a property development firm to develop lab space, because that's what's coming. And we don't have, we've already, there's no if you want to set up a lab space, whether that's a wet lab or like a decent workshop, there's just not that space available in the cities. And that's what we need. And other Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham have all invested heavily in that space, and so Cambridge is in a similar situation in terms of capacity, but they've got a very different story of why that's happened. But we're going to be delivering more high-tech biotech engineering businesses that are going to need that space. And as exactly as Alasdair says, if we're not joined up about getting ready for what's coming, we're going to lose companies really quickly. Therefore, we're going to lose the inward investment, we're going to lose the jobs, and people are going to have to go and set up their businesses elsewhere. They're not going to want to, but they're going to have to. And we within the Northern Accelerator, which is a 6 northern universities, because we have York as well, group that's been working together that is all focused on the 6 universities, spinning out university research. We've lost a couple of businesses to other parts of the country, and that's not what this funding, that's not why government fund us working on this. So it's really, really, really important. So in terms of what's coming through the universities, it's very much about sustainable technologies, but also strongly in the life sciences sector as well. we've seen a huge growth in the amount of engineering businesses actually. And I think as well, there's still some sort of like, we might call it the dirty engineering things as well. There's still innovation needed in engineering sectors that aren't going anywhere, but might need to then improve. But also we have things like hydrogen and hydrogen innovation that I think is the universities are going to could have the potential with other collaborations overseas to really create a hub in the region too, and it's a bit of a race to the top in terms of
That's cool.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to look forward to, a lot of excitement. Julie, you've seen that through the funding ecosystem as well?
I mean, our mission really is to try and help founders and entrepreneurs understand their own personal position, and it's all around that education piece and providing a service that enables them to navigate the many options. And I think network, when we talk about bold prediction or bold hope, it is about network and joining the dots, because from our perspective we're helping businesses move forward for investment, and we should be better at signposting to the relevant people and taking feedback and opening doors for the entrepreneurs. Because I always say to a founder or a business owner, it's lonely. You're focused on the business and your expertise. You didn't go into that business thinking, I want to understand this funding landscape. That really, jumps us out of bed on a morning. So it is the responsibility of everybody else to do that translation to enable these really, really inspirational people to move things forward. And I do hope that, and I think there's such a motivation across the professional community to help businesses at the moment, more so than there ever has been. To make it, a more successful place that's recognised for really positive things that are happening.
I think that also as well, we've got to do, I've seen so many failed attempts at raising the visibility of the region, bringing people up, us going down, and it's just, something isn't clicking. And I don't know why that is yet, but we're still not really getting that visibility of what the region is capable of doing. And there's, we have good case studies that we can go and look and learn from, like what Manchester's been able to do, what Liverpool's been able to do, and then there must be more that we can do in order to raise visibility, to bring people in, to get them excited about the opportunities, particularly the VC and investment community.
We recently took 8 entrepreneurs via our programmes down to London, and we filled a room full of VCs and angels. We'll bring it to you if you won't come to us. And it was brilliant, and the feedback was phenomenal. And a lot of the investors in the room said, this programme sounds great. This, helping businesses get pitch ready and investor ready. That's phenomenal. We don't have any of this down here. No, it's great up here. You should come up. But the overwhelming feedback was, it's quite far. There's still that geography thing around investing where you kind of have your breakfast or within that period of time of making it easy to step in. But we did have some really positive situations and conversations spin off the back of that. And there hopefully will be some positive results. But I think we've done that once. And it is a bit like standing up in a room and shouting once. You've got to keep doing it. So I think it is that repetition as well.
I'm really excited by the fact that we've now, we're back to where we were with sort of in the RDA days. We've now got, a mayoral combined authority. It feels like we're singing a little bit more with one voice. I mean, hopefully now we've got the platform in place to tell a more cohesive narrative about the region, because we know, I think the last few years we've probably all been guilty of telling our own stories, and we've all got our own little initiatives that have been going on. But I'm hoping through Kim McGuinness now we can tell a really sort of united and an inspiring story about the North East that will encourage people to get on the train, as you say, Julie. Which what I find really amazing is that when you talk to people in London, there's some reticence to get on the train. When you talk to people in the US or elsewhere abroad, they think, "What? So you're just a couple of hours from London by train?" Well, they see us as like just a suburb of London. It's of no consequence to them, to be honest with you. It's just not an issue. We feel the distance far more in the sort of UK than they do when they put more sort of global beyond things. It's really interesting.
And we shouldn't have to sit there in meetings where somebody sort of says, "I've been to Newcastle before on a stag do or something, or I've been to see the football," and it's like that can't be the only thing. And I think that there is more branding and marketing that needs to be done, that was in the heady days of the One North East, was the thing that we can all really tangibly hold on to, that made a real difference, which created that catalyst, which we're now riding on the waves of.
When I moved up to the northeast from Cambridge back in 2006, it was very much off the back of that sort of passionate people, passionate places campaign that the idea was running at the time. It's in lots of great kind of films and pictures of the Northumberland beaches and so on. And it's quite inspiring. If I hadn't been to the northeast before, and before this role came up at North Star, and that was very much that definitely helped to sort of inspire me to move up.
That's one of the missions of our podcast, is to help share our passion for the startup and scale up community in the Northeast and spread the word a little bit. And, we're doing our little bit to help share that marketing message, I guess. And I guess that's a great way to end this podcast. And I'd like to thank you, Julie, Lizzie, Alasdair, for helping us do that. A great 45 minutes of our time, and thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very
John,
much.
we should wish John a happy birthday soon.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
49 today.